It's incredible, isn't it? It's an incredible turnaround. Anyway, more on that later, perhaps. Thank you to everybody who came to the rally. It's not the first. It's not the last. So maybe more next time. I'll be in Hastings on the 31st for the Chemtrail Awareness event. Thomas Sheridan is a writer and author. He's done a lot of great insight and research into mind control and the nature of psychopathy, being psychopathic. And he may be, I believe, in Sligo, Ireland at the moment. And if we have him on the line, are you there, sir? Hello, Mr. Sheridan, are you with us? We're calling now. It's time for the headphones. You are listening to the FreeTruth show on These Changing Times Radio. Hello, Mr. Sheridan.
Hi, Patrick. How's it going?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Are you in Sligo now?
I am indeed.
Loud and clear.
Where are you located?
Where am I located? You know, Bob Chapman said the very same thing to me, but he said it in a very creepy voice. It was quite scary.
Really?
You have the Irish lilt, and yeah, because he used to be US Army intelligence and has got one of the biggest gold miners on the planet at some stage. When Bob Chapman says to you, and I love this guy, when Bob Chapman says, "Where are you located?" It's scary.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like the next sentence is "speak up or else."
Yeah. Where can we find you? I'm in Dorset on the south coast of England.
I know it.
Yeah. You do? You've been this way?
Well, I've been all over England many times.
It's a nice cliffside and it's a nice landscape, nice seascape. It's a good part of the world.
Your summers are nice.
Well, no, it rains every weekend. It's them damn rain machines, you know.
Yeah.
Well, you never know these days, eh?
Well, when are we going live?
Oh, we're live now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, you're all right.
Oh, grand. Good. Well, Mr. Sheridan, Thomas Sheridan, is a writer and author. You're from Sligo originally yourself?
No, I'm a Dubliner. I'm originally from Dublin.
Excuse me, I should have known. And well, the Dublin accent's quite obvious, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah, I have a softer version of it.
Right, Southern Dublin.
No, I'm actually from the ghetto from the north side. But well, in order to survive in business, I had to learn how to talk normally. I can't sound like this anymore, you know. I had to give it that up.
I know. Yeah. Oh, the nasal Dublin thing, you shook it off. See, you have to conform. So you recognise that people have to conform to get on.
Oh yeah.
You know, be it on a small bit level or a big level, you know.
Well, this is how cultures are being destroyed.
So that's altering your behaviour to fit a perceived view of people.
Absolutely.
Get on. Is that a tiny form of psychopathy?
Yes. Well, I guess it's part of the psychopathic control grid notion to basically create everything on a level playing field, so we're all easy to control, and that would make us that's better for them, you know. It's if we're all the same and we're all easy to control, then regional problem in that regard, you know. So they're very obsessed with diminishing, watering down, and getting rid of cultural differences. If you travel around the United States, the accents are all nearly gone, like the southern drawl. They're all vanishing, you know. Now you have things like, you know, these sort of California accents, Buffy accents everywhere now. Are you getting a rumbling noise on the line?
Yeah, I'm just there's a constant rhythmic kind of fuzz, isn't there? I'm just trying to work out where it's coming from. I'm just typing to Patty now. Is that us? I hope we're not being hit with like HARP brain waves.
It sounds like a robot or something.
Yeah, it's the woodpecker effect, eh?
Yeah, it's very strange.
Well, apparently it's not coming through on the air, so if we can put up with that until we identify where it's coming from.
Oh, well, that's okay.
It is quite annoying, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
Must
strange.
be one of yours. Yeah, it is strange. I'll take off a couple of tabs, see if that works. Yeah. I'm only on Skype at the moment. I'm not online. Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, I'm only on Skype too. Anyway,
Okay,
we'll go now.
it stopped.
Yes, very good.
It's not coming through on air, and it stopped now. That's great. We can start again. Thomas Sheridan is a writer and author on mainly mind control and psychopathy. Would you be able to give us a brief background, Mr. Sheridan, of your background and in general?
Sure. Well, I grew up on the north side of Dublin, and even from the time I was a kid, I could never understand cruelty, this need to hurt people. And even though I grew up in a neighborhood, I was always amazed that the worst kind of sadistic cruelty I saw in terms of like messing with people's minds seemed to come generally from authority figures, like school teachers. And it never made any sense to me that, like I couldn't understand what they were getting from it, like torturing kids over their homework and things like that, making them worried about like failing exams and all kinds of things like that. And then when I finished my schooling, I played in the music business, and then when I was about 19, I ended up in New York, played in some bands there, had a great time. And again, meeting these strange individuals on the periphery of the music industry, like promoters and stuff like that, and there was something about them. They were different. There was a behavior that they all seemed to share that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then when I left the music business, I studied graphic design. I went to work in Wall Street and some advertising firms in like investment banks as well. And it was at this point where I entered into a world that seemed to be filled with these sort of puzzling people that I couldn't quite understand what kind of strange energy they were giving off. And then one day there was a young guy there, and his name was David, and he was joking around with me. I think because I was in a band, and he thought it was kind of cool, and he was trying to make.
I'm a registered medical psychopath. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's what happened. And he came out with this story, and then that became this whole thing of how he became, although he was like an actual, medically diagnosed psychopath. And then that became my backstage pass to this world that I knew nothing of. And it just, from that point on, became incredibly fascinating. Now, back then, it was almost impossible to get any kind of mainstream publications on it. And I never understood because of all the damage. And then as I slowly began to wake up in, say, around 2004, 2005, I'd read an awful lot about psychopathy, and I'd also read a lot of books on psychology, and I had quite a good working knowledge of these things. And then it suddenly started to make sense that the reason why this is not in the mainstream is because they don't want the rest of us finding this stuff out and then pointing the finger at the control system and saying, uh-oh, that's what's running the show. This is why politicians seem different and weird, and when they walk into a pub, they're the last person you want to have a beer with, and yet they end up running a country. This is why people on the media in mainstream media are strange and bizarre. This is why people who run entertainment don't seem like us, and a lot of them are psychopaths, and they could be clinically diagnosed as psychopaths. And so that's how this came about. I wanted to share that knowledge that was suppressed.
From what you were saying there, the nature of a psychopath, from my research, the common thing I conclude is that the psychopath fears exposure most, being exposed as a psychopath.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing. This is our ignorance is the only thing that keeps them feeding upon us. The only people who are ignorant to the notion that 4% of the human race have no good in them, and 4% of this 4% are predatorial, is the only reason that they can survive. Otherwise, they couldn't survive because they're completely enabler dependent. They cannot they're not autonomous. They cannot exist on their own. They need to parasite, use, and live off other people. And they live in absolute, this is the only thing they fear. They live in absolute terror of being found out. And they will go to the most extraordinary lengths, including leaving a job where they're making an awful lot of money if they think someone might be onto them.
That's why I love doing what I'm doing. If you want to shake the very foundations of the New World Order, if you want to get to the very crux, and I don't mean that in a Rosicrucian Masonic connotation, if you want to get to the very heart of the matter and destroy the system from inside out so it's fair for people, because it's not designed to be fair, expose the psychopaths who yearn attention.
Exactly. And this is a weapon. This is a magic bullet. This is the weapon that can get them, because this is something they can't. It's shock. It's bulletproof in many ways, because they cannot put this thing down, because it's their own science being used against them. They're very comfortable with you saying they're aliens or the Nephilim or shape-shifting reptilians. They're very happy with you to say that. But as soon as you turn around and say, hold on a second, what's...
Excuse me, hello? Have we lost Mr. Sheridan? I don't doubt it.
And you're projecting your insanity on the rest of us.
Hello, Mr. Sheridan? Are you with us?
You can't do anything about this. And interestingly enough, Patrick, what's happening now is that more and more, I notice, is now an attempt to kind of ridicule the science of psychopathology. John Ronson has brought out a book called The Psychopathic Test, and it's just a mainstream quote-unquote alternative journalist viewpoint that basically, it's all a load of rubbish because they call everybody psychopaths. Anyone could be called a psychopath. And, this is one of the most easily definable and determinable psychiatric conditions. It's very easy to determine these people. So now the elites and the media have a vested interest in trying to shut this stuff down, just as most people are starting to wake up to it.
Well, I remember Alan Watt mentioning on cuttingthroughthematrix.com on his education program. He's on about 5 times a week.
Yeah, it's a great show.
I remember him talking about psychopaths at a higher level in the elite chambers of commerce, or CEOs of companies, or indeed politicians, or generals of armies. One of the things that they're most concerned about, and they like to cover every variable before we've even thought about it, if we had any thoughts of resistance, before we've even thought about that, that's covered also apparently, is the emergence of the psychopaths at a lower level becoming a threat.
Yes, and this is...
As far as I can work out, I can work out with the media and the mass mind control, let's call it that, in all name, that's what it is, of the media, people are trained to being everyday psychopaths. In order to survive in a split personality psychopathic system of money, then I think with the media and films and pre-programming and conditioning, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, but are we not, as the public, on an everyday level, the next update for this generation, if you like, being trained to be psychopaths?
Very good point. Now, it's actually a little more complicated than that, because a true psychopath, the one that has the actual clinical and neurological determinable pathology, is born. They're not made. They come out of their mother's womb like that. However, there is something which I've termed a proto-psychopath. And what a proto-psychopath is a person who's not born a psychopath, but is made a psychopath.
Through trauma?
Through trauma, through sex.
Patty, if you can hear me, I notice we lose Thomas Sheridan when you type something. It's just it might be a coincidence, but I seem to lose Thomas when you're typing, Patty. Sorry. Mr. Sheridan, we lost you there for a second. Please continue.
Sure. The thing seems to be that I'll give you an example of a psychopath and a proto-psychopath. Ian Brady and Moira Hindley, the Moors murderers. Ian Brady was a natural-born pure psychopath. Moira Hindley was made into a proto-psychopath as a combination of her traumatic childhood, having two alcoholic parents who constantly abused her sexually and physically, and poverty. And the combination of that, and then encountering Ian Brady. Ian Brady basically has found the perfect accomplice, and he made her easily into a proto-psychopath. Now, she still wasn't a psychopath because she actually showed remorse for what she did when she started to come out of her mind control spell while she was on the dock, and spent the rest of her life saying, Brady didn't. He just didn't give a shit. Like all psychopaths, they don't even understand why they need to say sorry. Now, this is very important in terms of how the social structure works. As they degenerate society more and more, this is going to create more and more proto-psychopaths that will be useful for them. And they're doing it in all kinds of ways. They're doing it through the media, making just shoving endless degeneracy in our faces. Endless negativity. You know, they use things like languages and phrases to make us hate and loathe ourselves. You know, the whole climate change thing, they talk about how we are not sustainable. This is all to brainwash you into self-hatred. And once you have a level of self-hatred, you can then become a proto-psychopath, and then you're very useful to the system then.
And you also lose your system of survival, your instinct for survival.
Yeah, well, a psychopath's instincts for survival are very reptilian. I'm not saying they are reptiles or anything like that.
No, I get what you're talking about. The reptilian part of the brain,
Yeah, the R complex, and where the upper level, you have the mammalian brain and then the human brain at the frontal cortexes. Well, that's where most human beings live, in the frontal cortex, and that's where they are deficient. And they seem to be mostly, their pathology is very reptilian in the sense that it's survival, survival of their DNA, sexual activity, and just constantly targeting, constantly trying to not get eaten by something ahead of them. And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a predator subspecies that lives amongst us.
Subspecies. Well, that's in line with the way the elite themselves, and I know it sounds like a general term to the listeners, but when I say the elite, I'm talking about the international bankers, the royal families of Europe, and the people above them, who we are not able to identify yet. But the elite themselves talk about that very same thing.
Yeah, well, that's why they're obsessed with things like Darwinian evolution.
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with it. And
what I mean is, sorry, Mr. Sheridan. What I mean is that they actually believe they're special.
Oh yes, absolutely.
A completely different species, actually, because of their right of might. Yeah,
and we're the subspecies to them. And the reason for that is all psychopaths project their own pathology onto their victims. So what's ever wrong with them, they tell their victim that's what's wrong with them. So when they talk about us and study us and manipulate us as a sort of a bacteria upon the planet, what's really happening is their own pathology of themselves is being projected back onto us.
The abuser always blames the victim.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. If a psychopath is in a job and he's stealing money, he'll blame the boss. If a psychopath is in a relationship and having babies with other women on the side, he'll blame the woman he's married to, and so on. He'll accuse her of having many boyfriends, or the children he had with her are not his kids. It's part of their mind control strategy because they constantly it's to keep you shattered and never to figure out how to deal with them.
I would like you to expand on that, because I heard you on Red Ice Radio talking at length about the everyday relationships, i.e. blaming the partner for what the one person may be doing one thing and blame it on the partner. And then you talk about how once that, after 6 months or so, that kind of ingratiating period has changed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not the same man I fell in love with. That's not the same woman I fell in love with.
Yeah.
That's when they really take your heart and rip it out and enjoy it?
Yeah, well, what happens is a psychopath will evaluate...
Take it from the top. It's very interesting because at an everyday level, people listening and maybe having problems with their relationship and their heart's being torn out and don't know why, and they feel like they're going mental, this explains a lot. So please, take the floor.
Okay, a psychopath first approaches a potential target. It will evaluate the potential use of that individual for the psychopath. It could be something as small as having a place to live, to avoid paying rent. It could be sexual. It could be, but their sexuality is quite different than a normal person. It's a power and control thing. So anyway, say a guy finds a woman and he targets her. The initial thing is he will try to mimic her in every way possible by pretending he has the same taste as her, the same beliefs, the same everything. And then what will happen then is she'll get tremendous flattery and a lot of sexual activity. And what is actually happening here is the psychopath is deliberately and purposely changing the chemical structure of her brain and filling it full of dopamine. And dopamine is an addictive chemical, and because it's related to pleasure centers. And she's having this sense of pleasure. Now she's basically drugged. She's doped. She's drugged. And she's easy to manipulate. So then the next thing that happens is he will try to move in with her legitimize the relationship very, very quickly. They want to get married like that. They want to move in like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned marriage means nothing to them.
Oh, it's like ordering a cheeseburger. A lot of them will be married multiple times. It means they're obsessed with it, but it's just something they need to do because it gives them almost a security, not an emotional security. They're not interested in that, but whatever the security they need for the time. And as soon as that relationship is evaluated,
what do you mean I'm a bastard? I'm your husband.
Exactly. Or you can't throw me out now. I'm your wife and we've co-signed the mortgage. That kind of thing. Oh yeah, exactly, and all kinds of things. But also, what also happens is, because the person, the target, was so filled with these chemicals in the early days, this dopamine and this love bombing, right? They become addicted to it, and they're always trying to get that back. So then the psychopath starts to change into a different personality, and the other person is confused and also addicted to this state that they were of euphoria that they were put into in the early days. And the more and more outrageous the demands the psychopath puts upon the victim will acquiesce to these demands in the hope that somehow they will get back to the person that they thought they married. You understand? But it's all a game to break down and destroy this individual to the absolute ultimate psychological submission to the psychopath. And then, while this is going on, the psychopath is looking for a new target or several targets, and it will already have the new target lined up before you're disposed of. And right before you're disposed of, you will be accused of all the things the psychopath did to you. You'll be made feel stupid, worthless, useless, and this is the most incredible thing, Patrick. I've gotten so much data now since the book Puzzling People came out that there are common patterns in terms of chronology to when this happens. They jump out of one relationship into a new relationship. It always seems to happen during the months between the end of April and the beginning of June. And the reason for this is they're like an animal. They're responding to changes in natural cycles, and they're ready to begin again with a new mate, because they're more like an animal than a human being in terms of how they exist. And it's the most amazing thing.
If these people knew this, or the majority of intelligent people, the majority of psychopathic people at high levels are super intelligent, or at least a very high IQ, they must be aware of this. So, hey, I'm just responding to the changes in the seasons and my biology. Don't blame me. I can rationalize this.
Oh, I don't even think they've rationalized it. They just run. They just go. They don't give a shit. But when they're gone, but this is some awesome stuff.
Hello? Hello. We've still got that buzzing kind of rhythmic fuzz going on. That's very strange. I don't know where that's coming from.
Before winter starts. As you know,
I'm sorry. Can you hear me, Mr. Sheridan?
Yes.
We've just lost you there for a second. Can we bring you back to the beginning of that sentence?
Yes. They jump out of their previous relationship between the end of April and the beginning of June. They have a kind of a psychopathic spring fever, but then they seem to legitimize the next relationship and also the previous one that they had around October, November, and early December. It's almost like they'll get engaged, married out of the blue, have a bit, get their new target pregnant, or if they're a female psychopath, get pregnant themselves.
Settling down for winter, maybe.
Yes,
maybe
just like
down for winter,
that's exactly it. They're purely looking in terms of their survival needs, like an animal.
Their survival.
Yeah, like the way if you
feeding on others.
Exactly, and you know the way like when there's I live in the summer, we'll build up our fuel for the winter. You know, start buying coal while it's cheap and turf and all the fuel you need, peat and wood. But they don't do that. What they do is they look for an enabler who will get them through the winter. Because they're a parasite, and it's so. If any of your listeners listening to this, if you think you've been discarded by a psychopath in a relationship, they were married to him or whatever, check the months and see if you were disposed of and devalued between the end of April and the beginning of June, and I bet you they have. That you can set your clock by these things. They're so predictable. Once you have all the info on them, you can literally set your clock by them.
I see. Okay, now we're going to take a little music break. You are listening to the FreeTruth show on these changing times with my special guest, Thomas Sheridan from Ireland, who's a writer and artist. And we'll be speaking about some of your cover magazine work when we get back from the break, and the higher nature of psychopathy in the politician's workplace and the CEO's workplace, perhaps. And if you can hang on there for a second, Mr. Sheridan, we'll be back right after this piece of music. This is aptly named Mass Hypnosis by Payday Monsanto.
We are rapidly approaching a moment of truth, both for ourselves as human beings and for the life of our nation. Now, truth is not always a pleasant thing. But it is necessary now to make a choice, to choose between two admittedly regrettable but nevertheless distinguishable post-war environments. One where you got 20 million people killed, and the other where you got 150 million people killed. Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but I do say no more than 10 to 20 million killed. Top.
We got the popular brainwash, all in the famous song. We got the military industrial complex, moves wide over your block.
That was Payday Monsanto and Mass Hypnosis. You remember from a few weeks ago, we spoke to, we had a guest at Payday Monsanto on the FreeTruth show, and a very interesting chap, and his lyrics are the best in hip-hop today. That's the way I view it. Very anti-New World Order, very awake, and refreshing to hear hip-hop and poetry being used as it's supposed to be, I believe, to enhance your knowledge in life. Welcome back, Mr. Sheridan, which is something you do, isn't it?
Yes, I enjoyed that song very much, Patrick. That was great.
Oh, thanks. You know,
very apt lyrics.
Yeah. The guy rocks. You should hear his Chemtrails tune, something else. I organised a chemtrail rally last Saturday on the 9th of July, and before that I organised a rally in all but name in Phoenix Park last May, the May before last year. It was called the No World Order Celebration, because under common law it's a celebration and you don't need a license for that. So we were kind of celebrating a no world order, and about 50 people turned up, which was more than this time. We organised a chemtrail rally. I mean, obviously you're aware of the aerial spraying that's going on around the world, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it's about. I've looked into it. It's definitely they're doing something. I don't know what it is. I've seen the stuff about, it's got these it's to poison us and stuff. I don't know if I believe that. I think, well, I mean, I could be wrong. This is pure speculation. I think it's more to do with something, that there's changes in the sun, or there's something coming from space that they're nervous about.
Well, whatever it is, the happy result for the eugenicists is that more people suffer and die, no matter what the scientific global warming combating scheme is, or whether they're worried about a supersolar star bumping into the Earth or not. The result is that our immune systems go downhill. Now, one thing I'd love to ask you, because you've done an enormous amount of research, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic or dismissive of your work, but you've done a great deal of insight and many, many years research into the nature of the psychopath at an everyday level and a higher level. But I'd love to ask you, you may have noticed how the media is there to control the public view. So what does it mean when, for example, I know that's not your forte, but or it sounds like something you haven't looked into much, perhaps, and I appreciate your expertise on the psychopathy. But what do you think if you recognise that the media is there to control your public opinion and not admit that they're poisoning people from the skies, or the result is that these chemicals coming out of the planes are toxic, carcinogenic, there's a massive psychology going on with the media. You turn on the news and you're trained to expect that they're telling you the truth, or that if something terrible was going on, they'd tell you. And just by omission, is that psychopathic?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the media is not your friend. It never has been. It wasn't set up for that reason. It was never set. The mainstream media, the word media just means the mediation between the elite classes and the plebs.
The
and
middle.
Yeah, the middle. And all that basically means is they're the messenger. They tell us what the reality is that's handed to us from high. Modern media and modern journal, I don't even understand what modern journalism is, especially newspaper journalism. It just makes no sense to me. But that's the whole point. We're being made crazy. We're given completely different and conflicting things every day. Now, for instance, I know some people who are mainstream journalists, and I can tell you for a fact one of them is absolutely a psychopath. He has a horrific personal life, and the other one I know for a fact is not all there. And yet these two people work for mainstream newspapers, very high circulation, and they're both. There's something wrong with both of them. Now, what I've noticed, I'm not disparaging all journalists. I'm sure there's some nice ones out there, but
they're probably brilliant writers, though. Yeah.
But the ones that seem to get the job and stay in power the longest and rise to become editors, I've noticed certain things. A lot of them seem to have addictions problems. A lot of them, if they're not psychopaths, they've had a problem with alcohol, a problem with drugs, a problem with something, and the media deliberately picks these types because they know that there's an inherent fear that their supply of whatever their drug is, and because of their addictive personality, they'll print and write whatever they're told to print and write.
Yeah, handouts.
Yeah, exactly.
Handouts from the foundations. If you shut up and just print what we say, you're sure of a place on the golf pitch on Saturday.
Or you're assured of your next cocaine fix. There's a lot of that goes on. You know, they know exactly. They're very clever. They know exactly who they need to pick to control, and it's.
Or we won't release those pictures of you with the prostitute.
Yeah, the prostitute that we funded, or the underage girl in Thailand. A lot of that goes on. But more than likely, most journalists love spewing us with bullshit. And because they think that's normal. And it's like, for instance, let me give you an example of a typical mainstream journalist, right? The typical mainstream journalist is pathologically hardwired to believe that a corporate and a government press release is the same thing as reality. You understand? There's no difference. If the average journalist was standing here right now and a meteorite landed on this desk, right? unless he or she got a corporate or government press release telling him or her that a meteorite landed on the desk, whatever is wrong with journalists, he cannot or she cannot come to accept what the obvious is in front of their face. That's why they're literally freezing and shivering and shaking in the snow in the middle and the rain in the middle of July and talking about man-made global warming, because the press release that's been handed down to them is the act. This is what the media is like. They've deliberately created a situation in the media where they want people who can't think for themselves, or psychopaths, and that's exactly what they have in all the TV outlets and all the newspapers.
Real journalism is dead. We've known that for some time. The BBC is not independent, and apparently it never was, which is most disappointing. I used to love going to sleep with the World Service on. Who knows what kind of implants I've had from that. But it's disappointing, isn't it, when you grow up to respect a certain independence of the BBC. Aunt Beebe, is it? Aunt Beebe? I can't remember.
Auntie Beebe.
Auntie Beebe, very, very cosy. And you grow up with your father figures like Terry Wogan and Alan Titmarsh. I'll just leave the Marsh bit out. And you have your father figures giving you your opinion because you're used to seeing them in your living room every night. And, it's very comforting. But as you say, they enjoy lying. They enjoy deceiving the public. That's the nature of a psychopath also. You mentioned about your experiences in New York with the lady when you wanted to be a punk band and said, grow your hair, you're going to play heavy metal, and I can guarantee you'll be on the major stage in a year. And, by the way, you may have to bend down for some people, and a year later you get the Motley Crue and Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses and all that. So you mentioned about the New York first meeting of what you suspect to be was then a psychopath. But you have them in the media, and it's in the entertainment industry, in music, and these people are there because they have certain traits. They rise to the top of their trade. They're controlling people. They're managing them. Is that their bag?
Yeah, and they're chameleons. They're tremendous chameleons. This is why they can, you have that thing within parliamentary democracies where a politician crosses the floor and goes to the other side. They literally hold their finger in the air and say, which way is the wind blowing this week? That's what I believe. So they make natural politicians. But yeah, they have no ethics. They believe in nothing. The only thing they believe in is their own survival. There's nothing in there. It's a predatory consciousness that resides inside a human shell, and this is why they're also obsessed with things like transhumanism and the likes of that. They spend their entire lives trying to be a credible facsimile of a human being. That's literally what a psychopath is.
Smelling the wind, yeah. So I hear. And the same with politicians and CEOs of companies, and what I'm attempting to do here, Mr. Sheridan, is to give some kind of the listeners some kind of an idea of just how prevalent this psychopathic nature is in their everyday life, and the everyday life, taxes, etc., being controlled by super psychopaths who will do what they're told and shut up and lie to the public and take all the benefits. And it's almost like a ladder. The Masons call it going up the ladder, blah, blah, blah. It's almost like a ladder of power and control. Now what urges a psychopath to go from being an everyday psychopath to yearning power? Is that one of the prerequisites, that you constantly have to fill a void and gain more and more power?
Well, yes, there's some truth to that, but the vast majority of psychopaths, and there are 4% in the Western world, according to official psychiatric and psychological figures in the West, are psychopathic to some degree. Most of them are shifty lowlifes. They've no ambitions. They're womanizers. They're spongers. They're parasites. They live off other people. Many of them would be perfectly happy to just move in with an elderly person or marry somebody and just sit there the rest of their lives watching TV, as long as they don't have to work, as long as they don't have to contribute to the family structure. And if the enabler gets sick or something happens, they'll just move on to someone else. That's most of them. Some of them, the ones that have intelligence, now they don't have a real intelligence, they don't have intellectual wisdom, but the ones who can be the best chameleons and do as they're told and be copycats and play the game. And they have an element of intelligence in terms of, like, they can remember. A lot of them have trouble with that. They can rise up through the system to the very top. They lie, steal, and even kill or have people killed. Now they'll often do most things like bully people. That's a very common one. The workplace bully is nearly always a psychopath. So is the schoolyard bully. In fact, the schoolyard bully is the psychopath learning how to change chemicals in your body by messing with you and stuff like that, and observing how your pupils in your eyes dilate, how your heartbeat increases and your hands get fidgety. They're tremendous ardent students of human behavior, and they know exactly, they learn their craft, interesting term, very, very young. And this craft they develop, this pernicious, predatory enthusiasm, it becomes like a drug to them. And every time they screw someone over and mess their heads up, they get what is termed a rush. It's a thrilling sensation that lasts for a little while, and it becomes addictive to them. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the effects a psychopath has on a victim and the effects the victim has on the psychopath. There's a chemical, almost like a chemical exchange that happens as a result of the predatory nature. And the psychopath is constantly looking for the next rush, like a junkie looking for a fix. So it'll move on to something else. It'll go to the next scam. And some of them, it's just a bigger scam, and a bigger scam, until they're a CEO of a major corporation. And even then, it's not enough. Then they could become the richest man in the world, and it's still not enough. They'll want to start then re-engineering society and things like that.
The nature of the New World Order is complete control of every facet of people's lives until there's about 500 million half man, half Borg slaves to serve them. You go back through the Communist Manifesto, or you can read Agenda 21. It's the same, pretty much the same document, and you'll see that for thousands of years, the richest people in society, or not even in society, we never see them on the TV, seek to dominate and control, especially now under a scientific dictatorship where experts and scientists run the planet. For all we know, it may have always been that way. The ancient Egyptians had the path of the course for the training of running a nation, an empire, was to master the science of mass manipulation, i.e. religion, all-seeing eye, or money, create a money system, language.
Yeah.
So here we are, roughly 4,000 years later. They must have got it down by now, this science, and now they have, as far as we know, they've never had this technology before. Doesn't leave much hope for humanity fighting off this. From your research, did you ever get a glimpse of how this psychopathic ruling international clique of bankers, being psychopathic, what else, did you ever get a glimpse of how you may find weakness and defeat them?
Yes, and we will defeat them. And there's one thing, because we have one thing that they don't. We're creative. No psychopath is creative. They're devious, they're manipulative and sneaky, but they do not have original thoughts. They're not creative because of the deficiencies in the frontal cortex of their brain. And my work and my book although it deals with some very dark-natured subjects, it ultimately is a book that's positive, and it shows the way out, and the way out is creativity. And this is why they desperately want to stifle human creativity. This brings us back to the pop music and the media. This is why they have degenerate music videos like Lady Gaga cutting her guts open and stuff like that. This is why they have art like Damien Hirst with corpses and stuff like that, and this is all to destroy creativity, to make it seem trashy and worthless, and anyone can do it because they
fear. It's a great
fear.
point that you raise. Actually, I remember you raising the point that psychopaths, they probably don't write great songs, if at all, or write poetry. They're not creative. Now, why is that? Because of the lack of empathy for the subject, lack of love.
Compassionate. Well, there's no deep inner feeling. Where does creativity? Yeah, where does creativity is spawned? It's spawned in the depths of the universe. They don't have that. So all they're going to ever do is to be chameleons and copycats and sycophants, and they do not have this ability to understand true creativity. Even when they portray themselves as a genius, it's almost quite comical. This is also why a lot of the ones who claim to be like visionaries, they often are mimicking something, an idea they got from somebody else. They'll steal other people's ideas, but that's not the same thing as them being creative. And their fight or flight survival thing has them in such a way that they're absolutely terrified of us. They are so frightened of us you would not believe it. This is why they spend all their time studying us like we're a bacteria or an animal. Because they're trying to anticipate our next move. And the greatest fear that they have is our creativity, because a creative intention. It comes out of nowhere. It manifests into reality and can be incredibly powerful and change the world very, very quickly. This is why they've always tried to take control of the arts by being patrons, and to make sure that the art that they approve of is the one that gets into the Tate Gallery, or the one that wins the Turner Prize, or the one that wins the Grammy or the Emmy or whatever. They're not going to make art that lifts the human spirit. They're not going to celebrate that, because the next thing that will happen is that will lift the collective human spirit in the same way. See, this is how modern human came about. The modern human being and the development of the frontal cortex took place directly coinciding with the creation of art and language, about 35,000 years ago. So they're very aware that creativity does something to human beings. It changes us, and it actually, they're terrified of that.
They're terrified of the masses. There's a little advert that I made once. Eugenics, it's the fastest growing career in our world today. So join the new Green World Order revolution, and you too could have a career in eugenics. And I ended it by saying, and remember, the only thing we fear the most is people waking up.
Well, didn't Zbigniew Brzezinski say that in Between Two Ages? The biggest fear to their agenda was a global mass political awakening. What he was really talking about was a global mass creative political awakening, where people would start thinking about new ways of approaching politics and finance and things like that. And that's what they really fear, a creative intention spawning up from the collective human consciousness. They're absolutely terrified of it, and this is why they're rushing towards transhumanism. They want to switch that off before it takes them out.
The brain chip. Do you think that's why they spend so many billions in their think tanks and foundations, sitting around a table, covering every variable imaginable that we might do, and predicting our behavior through a virtual you in the Pentagon, for example, through social networking, phone calls, to a 90% accuracy, apparently, they can predict what they want to do. Do you think that's why they pour so much money into covering variables, because they lack the creativity to be able to think?
Exactly.
They're covering
exactly.
Anyone that even sniffs a chance at being able to undermine this new world order system, which everybody should fight against, because it's death and enslavement, or worse, lose your soul. That's probably why they put so much money into thinking, because they can't think for themselves creatively.
Well, even a psychopath at home is obsessed with control. A psychopath father will be obsessed with all the movements and coming and goings of the family, the members, the child, the children, the wife, and they will monitor the neighbours. Because they're always looking for something that may undermine their power base. This is why they will pick on their own children and be overly obsessed about what their child does, says, thinks, and aligns himself with, because it might undermine his status as the paternal godhead psychopath within the family. And that's projected, and that's scaled up then to the controlling system. They're exactly the same. They see us the same way. And this is why the biggest industry that they have is human social engineering through monitoring and conditioning. That's the world's number one industry. That's it. That's what you may call it Hollywood, you may call it pop music, you may call it social network. This planet's number one industry is human social engineering.
Yeah. And infertility is probably a close second.
Yeah.
Apparently the infertility business is rising. People who are infertile, that can't have kids, all the toxins and steroids and infertility drugs in the food now, it's difficult to have kids.
Well, the foods, like all the soy-based foods, are full of transestrogens, and they're killing sperms in the Western world.
Yeah, we need to get bigger balls. That's what we're saying.
And go back to the diet our grandparents ate: meat, eggs, potato, and natural, as close to nature as possible.
We need to get a backbone, that's what I was saying. Forgive my crude language and terms. People need to get a backbone. They need to stand up and be a bit more brave and it's difficult when you first start looking at this information of how the world works, and, you take the different pill, i.e. the Matrix, and you get a different view of the things. It's common to switch off in fear, but once you get over that, it's plain sailing. You become stronger and more confident. The last 4 years, I'm a different person. My friends personally told me that they've noticed a big change in me. I'm more confident, more eloquent. But I think it's empowering, isn't it? Knowledge generally. How do you feel today?
I would never
your research.
Yeah, I'd never go back to being the person I was. I'm very happy and contented in my life now. I wake up every morning not knowing what the day is going to bring, except it's going to bring new possibilities and new knowledge. And I understand the game plan now. And once you understand the game plan, then you're off, because then you know how to negotiate your way through this system. And that's why
stay alive longer too.
The process is very important. Once you get wise to them, you're on your way. I know some people I didn't get really frightened at first, because I think I was always kind of woken up. I just think I was, like, not completely, but I always knew things were kind of weird when I was a kid.
I understand what you mean, because around 1992, I had what I thought was the full measure of the Freemasons. It's an old club. Okay, that's the way perks and business is done. All right, you might not even get a job. You might get if you're a Mason, you might get a job even if you're less qualified than the other 9 people. Okay, that's the way the world works. And I switched off and went back to work for 10 years and didn't think about it much more. But had I known then that they were part of an integrated system to murder 90% of the population, I probably wouldn't have put my sword down so quick.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. It's just a lot of them don't know about it either. That's again like what I was talking about journalism earlier on. That's why the Freemasons in most countries are just full of like mediocre people who are like greasy little social climbers, but they're very good for getting your agendas through, because they'll do whatever you want to get that little bit of power.
Now, I'm a self-proclaimed force. I've often said that the system of Freemasonry, because it keeps up the system of control, because it's a major cog of bolstering the New World Order's agenda, Freemasonry ideology itself is my enemy, because I love freedom and I love humanity, and I don't want to be half Borg, and I'd like to have children someday and not be infertile. All the big pharmaceutical companies, the police control structure, the surveillance grid, a lot of it wouldn't have happened without the Masons. But, first, second, third, fourth, fifth degree, maybe even 10th, not my enemy. They're just willing fools, as they call them. So if any Freemasons do happen to be listening, or it does get back to you, I'm not out to destroy your way of life. I'd just like you to be a bit more considerate of humanity and stop serving your satanic masters, because you're being deluded too. You're being deceived too, because unless you have a lot of money, you're not going to reach above 33rd degree, and by the time you get up there, you're so mind controlled, and the real Luciferian agenda is presented to you. You know, if you knew that from day one when you were raised up, you know, and pulling your trouser legs about, you know, you probably wouldn't have joined, you know. So just for the record, Freemasonry ideology is my enemy, because I'm for free humanity. So not every Mason is my enemy, but the ideology certainly is. A bit like socialism, really.
Yeah, and ultimately, yeah, just like socialism, and ultimately, even if you get to the top, it's pointless, because you won't be a member of the families who are running the show at the very top. You won't be of the bloodline, and that's how ultimately you're in a go nowhere situation at the end of the game.
Thomas Sheridan is a writer and author, and do we have a little bit more time with you, Mr. Sheridan?
Yeah, sure, whatever you want.
We'll take a quick music break. This is, again, Payday Monsanto and the new Al-Qaeda.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you today the successor of the recently deceased Osama bin Laden, Anwar al-Awlaki.
Thank you. I'm your new Al-Qaeda chief. Let's have a blast. Mossad told me that my legacy will last.
You're listening to the FreeTruth Show on These Changing Times Radio. I am your host, Patrick Lynch, and we have on the line Mr. Thomas Sheridan, a writer, author, and artist. Are you still with us, Mr. Sheridan?
I am indeed.
Welcome back. That was Payday Monsanto again. And we'll be having Payday on again soon, so please tune in regularly, Mondays and Thursdays. No Saturdays anymore. It's too much. I'd rather 2 quality shows than 3 bad ones. And I can get out there and wake up the masses and get away from my computer. My question to you, Mr. Sheridan, is, you mentioned about mind control. We were talking about mind control earlier. Do you view that as 2 separate spheres of study than psychopathy, or do you find the 2 kind of inextricably linked?
Well, I think when you start going deep into the psychopathology and the notion of the psychopath, it becomes quickly apparent that it becomes the sort of the thread that strings all the other things together. Things like transhumanism, things like mind control, things like social engineering, and the media. It's very, very interesting how it seems to be almost like the thing that encapsulates them all. Now, there's always been these things have always existed in and of themselves. Maybe things like if we lived in a world that wasn't run by psychopaths, transhumanism might be something that could, just like nuclear power, it might be something that could be done properly and could be useful for expanding human consciousness. But because psychopaths run the show, you cannot trust it. Just like you can't trust their politics, and you can't trust their media, and you can't trust their science, because and they are running the gig. So it's like, and that's where mind control overlaps within it. Now, I can't see of a reason why mind control would be good, but yes, that's what psychopaths do to their victims. They mind control them. If you look at many of the mind control techniques developed by everyone from the CIA to Scotland Yard to the NKPD and the old Soviet Union, they're all very similar to how a psychopath works. You know, when you get pulled in by the cops, well, I've never been pulled in by the cops, but I have friends who were, and they get the good cop, bad cop routine, where one cop comes in and calls you all kinds of names.
Hello? Mr. Sheridan? Okay. We may have lost Mr. Sheridan for a second or two there.
Yeah.
Hello,
there?
Mr. Sheridan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then the lady cop comes in.
Yeah.
And she's a nice cop.
We were talking about the the psychology of the good cop, bad cop routine. We just lost you there for a second. Please continue.
Yeah, well, after you've had the bad cop who's frightened the hell out of you, is intimidates you, the big muscular guy, the nice female cop or guarder comes in, and she'll say, "Oh, don't mind him. His wife's not well. He's having a bad time. I'll make sure you'll be okay here tonight." And so what happens is the combination of both the good cop and the bad cop is the same thing as the abuse and the love bombing you get from a psychopath, and it's all to do with confusing you, breaking down your psychological sovereignty, and making you easier to have them control you.
Well, a good example would be on a mass level would be the Germans are the bad guys and the Americans are here to save you, but they're both funded by the same bankers.
Yeah. Same thing. We're here for freedom, and they're dropping bombs on you.
Bombs for freedom.
Yeah, you're being. You see that exactly. That's it. That's it in a nutshell, literally.
Well, if I was an American, I'd vote for Obama again, because if war means peace and peace means war, I'm happy with that, because I got that from CNN. Totally agree with them. I'm trained no other way, and I'm quite happy going to war for peace. Yeah, that was being sarcastic, by the way. Just in case people were listening and thought I was a psychopath. At what point do you think, from all your research, was it ever tempting to think, oh, hang on a minute, when you read symptoms and you take on the kind of symptoms of what you're reading about, at any stage did you think to yourself, God, that sounds a lot like me?
Well, we can all be capable of being jerks and creeps at some point in our life. We're all capable of doing bad things. But the difference between us and a psychopath is that we feel remorse for what we've done and we try to make up for it. They don't care. That's the difference.
Oh, that old chestnut, eh?
Yeah. We have a conscience.
Yeah.
And that's what
exactly.
that's it. We have, and that's our fail-safe switch. They don't have that.
Now, where does the conscience spring from? If some are not born with it and they're psychopaths and they thrive in the political arena or sport or celebrity or CEOs, bankers, why is it missing? It must be somewhere. Is it suppressed?
Well, maybe not. Maybe no. I don't believe it is. I believe that the actual. Now, I'm going out of the brain here and going out of grey matter. And I'm going into the mind, into the world of consciousness. Now, so if you look at the human brain, right, we have the consciousness that exists outside it. It's non-local to the human body, and it only uses the brain and the nervous system as a way of experiencing this reality and co-creating this reality through the five senses. Now, the underlying consciousness...
Can I just stop you for 1 second?
Sure.
In your Red Ice interview, you did allude to the idea that what else would explain it, I'm paraphrasing here, but what else would explain this nature of psychology for some people, like psychopaths, what else would explain this lack of conscience but an entity going into the child at birth? Can you expand on that a bit more?
Well, I don't know if I believe that. What I believe ultimately is that there's just like everything in nature is made of positive and negative, and consciousness is the same way. And there are consciousnesses that exist that are negative, and that's where the psychopath comes from. Now, that's probably what enters the human body at birth. However, you just reminded me of an amazing story. A friend of mine told me he got really good at astral traveling. When you leave the body, when you can meditate and leave the body. And this guy's completely 100% sincere. He's not the kind of guy to make this stuff up. And he got really good at it. And he said on several occasions, when he would return back to his body, he would see this almost black entity, almost like it looked like a little ape or a gorilla, almost like a troll or something, in the shape of a sort of a black mist, trying to get into his body. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe the psychopath is that actual thing that he saw getting into a body and taking control of it. I'm just speculating here because there is a there's a long supernatural tradition associated with psychopathology in terms of allegory, folklore, fairy tales, and literature. But I found that very interesting when you told me that. Was that a psychopathic consciousness trying to get in? I don't know, but there you go. It could be something like that.
A regular kind of vision of altered states.
Something like that. I've had strange experiences on things like LSD and magic mushrooms when I was younger, and we all know the world, the reality is quite different than what we just this reductionist world we live in. But however,
in altered states it can appear different, for sure. I agree.
Oh, and you're aware of other entities and other sort of levels of consciousness outside the one that you're currently experiencing. So it's almost like we have these bodies and we've jumped into this one, and maybe negative consciousness, I know this for a fact, predatory consciousness, they jump into other bodies, and that's how they become psychopaths.
Your view is that there is interdimensional kind of black mists of psychopathic nature that enter the body possibly at birth or through a dreamlike state.
Yeah, well, it's at birth or in the womb, but that's where work is going now. There's no hardcore genetic evidence for it. There doesn't seem to be any underlying science to show that it happens through any kind of physical damage, because it just happens to families out of the blue. It's almost like a predatory savant that can enter a perfectly normal family where they've had no history of psychopaths. It's very strange. It's definitely rooted in the consciousness, and it definitely happens at the moment of birth or in the womb. But it's absolutely not caused. It's not caused by any kind of brain damage or anything like that. The problems in the psychopathic brain and I won't say the problems, the different way they operate the human brain in terms of how they partition information all over the cerebral cortex, quite different than a regular human being, is a result of them being psychopaths and not caused by them being psychopaths. The underlying consciousness that exists behind the human body, that's where the psychopath resides, and that's where you reside and I reside, where our conscience. So to me, it's some kind of mutation subspecies that lives among us, that's rooted in consciousness, that is here for a reason, and that reason is the evolution of the human race up to higher states of consciousness by coming into contact with them.
Naturally, all I can do while I'm doing this radio show, as a simple example, is to deal in facts, and that's all I have to go by. We're kind of veering into the metaphysical, which is studied a great deal scientifically now. And for example, the elites themselves apparently they believe in a form of reincarnation. They breed with each other over generations, specifically to retain the psychopathic traits, the non-feeling of non-empathy, no sympathy, and they believe that by intergenerational breeding with the same families, often stillborn in Darwin's case numerous times, to retain that psychopathic element.
Yeah.
So they believe, I'm being general here, but if you look at the things that go on in Bohemian Grove, and by the way, folks, Anthony J. Hilder is holding a protest in California at Bohemian Grove later this month, so do check out his website and various other ones, aircrap.org, and there's a couple of YouTube videos on that. And as we see from the revelations at Bohemian Grove, these guys are into their satanic jumping around and prancing and homosexual orgies. So these Luciferian kind of rituals, which personally I don't give a jot about, I don't believe in the devil, that's a form of mind control for the lower echelons, the lower minions themselves, like Kissinger, although big players on the public stage. And when you look back, I was just at a talk. I will get round to my point in my questions. Bear with me. I was at a talk I just happened to be walking past yesterday, and there was a talk going on Sir Francis Bacon. Alan Chapman, who's on the Sky at Night, apparently was giving a talk. It was free, and my question to him was, Sir John Dee, who was 007 for the Queen Elizabeth I, was bang into channeling entities to gain scientific knowledge. So the higher elites throughout history and today, we know Tony Blair used to prance around doing rituals in number 10, and most presidents seem to have some medium or another with them, advising them. So we know the elites themselves, and Hitler, as far as Hitler was concerned, with the occult. So when you speak about these entities entering through, that consciousness, that lack of conscience being a result of entities entering the body or the mind, or it's also what the elite believe. Can you comment on what I've been rambling about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I had a friend in New York who attended Bohemian Grove back in the 90s, long before I even heard of it. He was a gay friend of mine, and him and his buddies were picked up in a nightclub on a Friday night in Manhattan and flown en masse to what he told me was a resort outside San Francisco in the woods, where he said they had this weird musical on an island in a lake, and then years later when I saw the Alex Jones and
how strange. Sorry, can you repeat the last couple of sentences there, Mr. Sheridan? We just lost you for a second.
Yeah. They give us the likes of Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking telling us that belief in the supernatural is psychotic and is delusional, while they themselves very much believe in this stuff and are big into it. And the only reason is, I can tell, is that stuff works. I don't know how it works. It's some kind of energy manipulation system. But if they're holding on to it and they're using it and have a vested interest in ridiculing it in our eyes so we never look at it, the answer is that stuff works. And that's the bottom line.
In my opinion, based on my little research I've done, it's a higher advanced form of mind control. Okay, you've got your 33rd degree Mason, and now they're entering into the Luciferian rituals and Skull and Bones, and above that, you've got 33rd degree. How many degrees are there? 180, I believe. So you have the chaps we don't see, and let's say Alan Watt calls them the lazy boys, and then below them the little fat men, and then you've got So we don't know who they are. We're never likely to. They may have advanced mind control techniques, which seems to be an important word. So how do we know? It's not all. How do we know it's not all a pile of crap, and they just know how to mind control their lower minions, be they the Queen or Kissinger?
Well, they may not even be fully human at the top. They may have already indulged in that, transhumanist alchemical engagement where they've merged with the machine, and it may be at the very top a computer hooked into the consciousness of former elites is actually running the planet. we don't actually,
life extension.
Yeah. So they may have had this technology for decades, and they've already done it. They already have merged their consciousness with the machine at the top, and they're existing for all eternity, and they're running us as a gigantic computer simulation. We really don't know what's up at the top. We can't say for sure it's like the Wizard of Oz, that it may be some guy behind the screen. But the more I think about it, I think at the very, very top, I'm talking about the ones like you says we don't know about. I think they've already undertaken that transhumanist alchemical engagement, and they've merged with the machine already, and that ultimately what maybe run the show, a super version of the HAL 2000 computer, 1000.
I've got to say though, from what I hear of them, they themselves mustn't be altered or changed. They must keep their survival instincts and remain as they were born.
Well, they seem to live very long, I've noticed. Psychopaths generally don't live long. They have it, I'm talking about the normal, regular, everyday psychopath. They don't. They generally do die younger. A lot of them are addicted to alcohol and drugs. A lot of them commit suicide because they're bored and they just opt out. When they commit suicide, it's not like a normal person. They just it's just like a machine switching off. That's how they think. That's how they sleep as well. When they go to sleep at night, they just close their eyes and they fall asleep. There's no internal dialogue at the end of the day. And I'm always amazed by the psychopaths at the top, like Prince Philip, Kissinger, and they all seem to live, and like David Rockefeller, they all seem to be lived to very, very old ages, and right until the moment of death, they're flying all over the world and taking part in all these conferences. So they've obviously got access to a level of medical care we don't.
Yes. Well, very recently it turned out that a lot of the top politicians will have access to military medical care now. Around about the same time they started spraying chemtrails, actually. We do have a caller on the line. Would you be interested in taking a call, Mr. Sheridan?
Of course.
Hello, caller. Are you with us?
Hello there.
Hello there. What's your name and where do you come from?
My name is Stuart. I'm calling you actually from the UK. I've got a question for you. When you talked about the spiritual side of things, the Luciferian doctrine, if you actually look and study what the Talmud says, and you go back to the ancient text and you go back to human history, things that have happened throughout history with the elite, going all the way back to things like Babylon, go back to things like Sodom and Gomorrah. If you go back to things that happened where it's documented, where there was a true exodus, when you look and do the research, you'll find that many of the prophecies that are written of the New Testament correlate with the Old Testament. And we're ignoring the fact that too much is being focused on that the words that are put out there by the character Yeshua are coming into full effect at an alarming rate. And for us to ignore and to pass it off that the human side can actually evolve, we're losing focus on what was set out to be told originally, and that we are battling against spirits. We're battling against principalities, against evil rulers. This was laid out a long time ago. This is something that if just the minute little bit of research in a 101 class will show you the answers. We're running around chasing our tails.
Caller. Hello, caller. You're breaking up quite a bit. Would you be able to sum up in one question quickly, because your line is pretty bad?
Okay, what I'm saying is are we ignoring the principalities that we're warned of? Are we ignoring the satanic hold on the planet? And are we forgetting to keep our eyes focused on the Messiah that is returning? Now, I'm a Messianic Jew.
Thank you for
I'm a Messianic Jew.
Yeah.
I'm a Messianic Jew.
I was just going to say, thank you for your question. It seems you're asking Mr. Sheridan what correlations there are between the script of today and the Bible itself.
Yes, I'd like to know his take on it, because I haven't heard anything mentioned about that side.
Okay, Mr. Sheridan, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah. I'm not a Christian, and I don't believe the Bible is anything other than a gigantic propaganda weapon. It's total disinformation, and it always has been. There's wisdom in some of the early scriptures, but the God of the Old Testament is a psychopathic God, because his invention, and he is invented, is a reflection of the people who drew that document up in Babylon 4,500 years ago. We are indoctrinated into the psychopathic control grid through the Judeo-Christian religion, and so my opinion of that is quite low. There's no such thing as a Messiah coming to save you. You've got to save yourself. Stop. I would ask people to stop believing in these Christian scriptures, because they're not real. They're made up. They give you false hope.
What part are you referring to, if I can ask? What part is made up?
In the Bible? Mm-hmm. Well, the Book of Revelation.
Well, you said Old Testament was rubbish. Let me ask If it's rubbish, what part is rubbish?
Oh, from Genesis right through to the end. There's no such thing as Satan. There's no such thing as the devil.
Let me ask you something, because I think you're missing something really big in Genesis. I think, and too many churches.
Okay,
Stuart, with all due respect.
Hello, caller. Can I just say we are running short of time, so
hold on. Give me one moment. What I want to point out is, if in fact that what you're talking about, what they're believing in Bohemian Grove, is directly correlated to something that is in Genesis, that's my whole point. I think you're missing the whole point, because nobody in the church, because the churches are controlled by Rome, let's be honest, it's a business, but let's get back to Genesis 6. And you may not understand Genesis 6, because I have a hard time believing that you've actually studied this side, because I didn't either. But when I look at it, I have to go, wow, there's a lot there. Genesis 6 flat out tells us that the sons of God, being the angelic beings, being the spiritual side, the extra dimensional, the energy that you're talking about, looked upon the daughters of man and found them to be fair. And they took upon them as many wives as they chose. Jesus Christ later tells his apostles that in the last days there's going to be all these things that happen, the earthquakes, the pestilences, the wars and rumors of wars. But most importantly, he says it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah. That's what Genesis is.
Mr. Caller, sorry, what's your name?
Stuart.
What's your name, Stuart? It's a big subject, a very large subject, which we may not be able to cover all here, but if you have one more...
I encourage your listeners to disregard its statement.
Sorry, hello?
I encourage your listeners to disregard the statement of your guest.
Hello? If you could sum up your viewpoint in just one simple question again, if possible. I know it's a large subject. Please go ahead.
I encourage your listeners to disregard that the Bible is rubbish. I encourage your listeners.
Well, Stuart, I didn't say the Bible was rubbish. I said that the Bible is a controlling document. The Bible that you read, whether it be the Catholic Bible, the King James Bible, or any other Bible, is a direct descendant of the framework that was developed at the Council of Nicaea by the Emperor Constantine, who was a Roman emperor.
I understand. That all happened in 329
heavily edited the text. No, but you see, you have to be very careful, Stuart. I'm not putting down your religion, and I respect that.
I don't have a religion.
Well, whatever. But I respect your current your spiritual journey. Applaud that. But at the same time, too, this spiritual journey should not be dependent upon third parties. It should be a personal journey. And when people get wrapped up in Bibles, Qurans, and Torahs and Talmuds, that what's happening there is they're handing over their own spiritual journey to a roadmap that more than likely has been developed by people who were never spiritual to begin with.
Well,
okay.
I have to disagree.
Thank you,
one of the
Stuart,
prophets was killed, and all of the apostles were killed as well by writing that book.
Okay, we've got to move on. I'm sorry. Thank you. I appreciate your call. Thanks for your call, Stuart. Thanks for taking that question, Mr. Sheridan.
No problem.
We're going to take a short music break, and we'll be right back after this tune. You're listening to the Free Truth Show on These Changing Times Radio. Welcome back to the Free Truth Show on These Changing Times Radio. I'm your host, Patrick Lynch, and we are talking to our guest, Thomas Sheridan, writer, author, and artist. Can you tell us a bit more about some of your artistic work that you've done over the years for various magazines?
I use art myself as a way of dealing with concepts that are in my head. A lot of my paintings and a lot of my drawings come from ideas that sort of developed in my subconscious, and often have to do with dealing with an issue in terms of, like, a lot of my work with psychopaths. The actual way I wrote the book was actually developed while I was making paintings that were about the experiences I had encountering these people. So it becomes very useful for me. I do illustrations for magazines like Paranormal Magazine, and I write articles for them, and I did a recent cover for them on the
We may have lost Mr. Sheridan for a second there. Hello? Hello, Thomas Sheridan, are you with us? Okay, we may have lost Mr. Sheridan there for a second. I think we're just calling him back in. You're listening to the Free Truth Show. Hello, Mr. Sheridan.
Yeah, I'm back.
Sorry, we lost you there for about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
There is a problem with Skype tonight. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So anyway, yeah, a lot of my art is based on things I'm interested in terms of working an internal dialogue around that helps me manifest it. In terms like even writing music helps me do that. I have some of my best and most insightful thoughts while I'm painting or playing guitar. That's why it brings you back to the creativity thing I was talking about later on. I couldn't come on a radio. Yeah, I couldn't come onto a radio show like this if I wasn't, a musician and an artist and talk about these things. And this is why they want to control the art so badly. And it's all creativity, not just like music.
We've lost Mr. Sheridan for a second there, but I can add until we get him back that if you are a painter, if you are an artist, if you are a musician, and you expect to carry on being a creative person in this scientific dictatorship, forget about it. People won't be allowed private property, private transport. People won't be allowed to be creative. They can't deal with anything. They won't promote anything from grassroots. So if people, what I was going to say was, if people have qualms or are in fear of standing up against tyranny, it's either that or you won't have any creative basis in your life at all if you allow these control freaks to run society even more.
Yeah, and they'll even do it on things like if you're like gardening is extremely creative. Yeah, we have to, what do? They have things like Gardener's World on TV and all these endless gardening programs.
Gardener's New World.
Yeah, and then you have like bullshitters like Dermot Gavin, putting little plastic balls in the garden and all this other meaningless rubbish that has nothing to do with celebrating the cycles of nature and getting in contact with the beauty and the majesty of nature. Or yet one more patio for your climate change garden on, with Alan Titchmarsh or whoever. And they want to destroy everything. You look at old books of, like, say, English country cottage gardens. They're beautiful. Yeah. All the flowers growing in a wild sort of random way around the front of the house. Absolutely idyllic and beautiful. Then they took control and we had the formal garden. And that was all part of destroying the creativity.
The Italian garden,
Yeah, and even the Gardener's World, patio with your little plastic water feature. This is where they don't want us. What it really comes down to is, within these moments of creativity, your ego is quiet. And when your ego is quiet, then your subconscious creative mind comes to the fore. And this is where new realities and new possibilities manifest. And this is the last thing they want us doing. Hence, why the television is loud and endless, why television is 24 hours, why we move rapidly. They do not want us recapturing the dignity of our own silence in order that we can develop a transcendental self-realization of our own creative potential. And this is what they're really doing, because they know that if we had enough time and a pause for thought, we would quickly the masses would quickly wake up to what was going on. So keep the sheep busy.
Yeah, something occurred to me. I had a thought myself that wasn't handed to me from the opinion. But my opinion wasn't handed from the television. Amazing, eh?
Amazing.
When people talk about them keeping your mind occupied, that's pretty much what the work ethic is, what the entertainment ethic is, keeping your mind occupied like a foreign invader in a country.
Yeah. Well, when you're watching television, your brain goes into alpha wave state, which is very similar to a light sleep, and ironically is the same brainwave level of psychopaths. And that's very interesting, isn't it? So TV literally turns your brain into that of a psychopath.
Now, I think we're being trained at an everyday level to think in psychopathic terms in a psychopathic system.
Yeah, so we accept it as normal.
the less foods I eat with toxins in, the less chemical water or unfiltered water I drink, the less I smoke, the more vitamin D I get from sunshine, the clearer my mind is, you know.
The less vampire and endless sex shows on TV you watch, the more you develop your notion of human decency and human compassion comes back to the fore.
Yeah.
You start seeing people as people and not as objects, which is exactly how psychopaths view us.
From all your years of research, Mr. Sheridan, it's difficult, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there hope?
Oh, absolutely there's hope. Absolutely. I see it more and more every day. Look, shows like yours and shows like you mentioned Red Ice and all these other outlets and all these other blogs and all these other things, these truth shows, these alternative research media, they did not exist 10 years ago. They were like, you might have had a scratchy ham radio set. Our creativity, like your creativity, in putting this show together and putting it on the air.
Hello, Mr. Sheridan. We may have lost Mr. Sheridan again. He was just summing up there. Hello. We may try and call him back in. Sorry, Mr. Sheridan. We just lost you for 10 seconds there. You were just summing up. Please continue.
Yeah, they may ridicule us at first, but the seed has been planted, and all it takes is for something to go wrong in their lives, to lose their job, to have their house taken away from them even because they missed one mortgage payment, and they will then remember what the nuts like us told them back in the day, and that's when the change happens, and there is hope.
I heartily concur, Mr. Sheridan. I heartily concur. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and would you be interested in coming back to talk to us again in the near future?
Absolutely, Patrick. I'd be delighted to come back on. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Hello to Sligo. Hello to everyone in Sligo.
I will certainly do that.
Great stuff. We'll have a pint someday, eh? That was Mr. Thomas Sheridan. I presume we'll have a pint someday. On the FreeTruth show, writer, author, and we didn't plug his website, so we're going to do that and get that to you in the chat box. And it's on the bio also. You can check out his website and YouTube. Thomas Sheridan, Sheridan. So here we are. I'm your host, Patrick Lynch, on the FreeTruth show. We've just got 4 minutes left, I believe. We have 4 minutes left? I think so. Yep. The Chemtrail rally was on the 9th of July, like the improvised conversations approach. The Chemtrail rally was on the 9th of July, and there were 30 people attended, but we got about 1,000 pieces of information to the public, plus all the flyers and posters that went up all over Cambridge on the same day. There was a rally, a protest by the English Defence League and United Against Fascism group, which was most unfortunate because perhaps most people went there. But those who did turn up, it was a great success because even if 100 people divulged the information and did a bit of research themselves, they may tell another 100 people, and that existentially rises to thousands itself. And onwards and upwards with the info war. So don't be disheartened when you see the video and, oh my God, I was going to go to that, and only 30 people turned up. Well, nobody cares. Well, that was my first view. Well, perhaps people don't care enough. Perhaps I didn't do enough. Perhaps enough people around the world didn't inform people enough, even though thousands of posters were printed up, which I know, and it was on various well-known radio shows, talked about and promoted, left links for headlines, Prison Planet, David Icke, Project Camelot, and to all the numerous amazing people who didn't make it but promoted the event across the country. Why was there only 30 people? See, it's tempting to say that perhaps after all our computer research and sitting behind the laptop all these years, perhaps we don't really care enough. It's tempting to think that, and I'm guilty of that myself. But considering it was the first of its kind, the whole idea of doing it was to inspire people to do a rally or a protest themselves in their area. Done. That film will inspire people. And B, number two, lots of information was given to the public, and we told the authorities in no uncertain terms on Ministry of Defence land that we've had enough and we're here to go out of our way to let people, the public, know what's happening. So the Chemtrail rally was a success, and hopefully it'll be the first or third or fourth around the world. Many more like it. So just 7 seconds to go. Good night from me, Patrick Lynch from the FreeTruth show. I'll see you Thursday night at 9 p.m. Good night, and fight the New World Order with every fibre of your being.